This is a test of the slice groove sequencer creating a usable clock and responding to a clock. I'll just use a drum loop sample, although for clock control more random sound would be better. Using RP mode, I'll record in peak slice to save time. That'll be enough. Now let's test the slices on the old handmade prototype Reflex. Set to slice groove sequencer mode by holding slice and tapping record. So I'll tap in a sequence to show it sequencing. This simple sequence will output a clock. It's a derived clock between 60 and 120 BPM, which also depends on your clock divider settings. Feeding into the T-kick, you can hear the clock being output by this sequence. During recording a new sequence, the old clock beat can be used to time the new one, which wasn't really intentional. Now let's clock the slice groove sequencer. Notice the Reflex clock output shifts to match. It's important the sequence you tapped in fit your time signature, or it'll sound odd when it's clocked due to alignment at the sequencer loop. Drum samples tend to end up at the same tempo of the original sample when tapping in by hand. So let's sequence in some CV selected slices to break it all up. The slice TG input can be used to feed in a first step or loop clock if your sequencer has that. Now Slice Groove has sensed an incoming loop trigger. The slice button will arm to start recording on the next sequencer loop, and the record button will arm to end recording and start playing the sequence. After recording, the Slice Groove sequencer won't recognize a clock until there is no signal for 3 seconds. This assumes you are switching from a gate used to create the sequence to a clock to keep it in sync. Now the clock can be changed. Again, a drum loop tends to sound strange in a slice sequence clock variation. Turn off slice loop so slices play through. Had these slices been sequenced with a slice loop off, then they would be playing as one-shot slices. But right now they're playing through, as you can hear. Dialing in some different offsets during slice sequence can make 8 steps sound like 40, which is the cool thing about Slice Groove Sequencer. Because the arm control to end the sequence isn't aligned properly right now, the BPM is still a little out of alignment, as you can hear on the kick, starting to fall out of sync. This will of course be fixed before the release of this update. It's good enough for synchronizing an echo on the second reflex connected in line though. With the rate locked, you can hear it fall out some. Can't help but mess with the new stutter feature. The clock into the slice groove sequencer hasn't been removed, so the reflex still thinks it is for recording a sequence. And the clock has no effect, as you can see. Remove the signal, and after 3 seconds, the clock becomes active. As I mentioned earlier, slices sequenced in with the slice loop off will play as one-shot slices if the clock is slow enough. An interesting thing to do with slice groove sequencer clock output is to use it to trigger play effects as a one-shot. The same play effects will jump in at each clock trigger. You can hear the short section of slice playing in reverse, selected from the start knob setting. Now forward. The same play effects will play until the play button is tapped to grab a new play effect from the next slice. This is of course mostly random unless you're very quick or the sequence is very slow, but it's fun anyway. So again, here's manually tapping in a sequence and then clocking it. The BPM is calculated at the transition from slice sequence record to slice sequence play. Clock input may cause a stutter on the slice sequencer's output, which can be used, but better to just use the clock source that's driving the slice sequencer. The clock output rate from a slice sequence is dependent on the setting of your clock divider. I like to keep it at 8, as this gives a good beat to play along with. And that's it.